Well, actually, yeah, if they're not getting any sound...
Take it from Skype.
See Skype. Because yesterday we had all sorts of echoes because of that, right?
Right.
So we go system sound.
So, by the way, everybody, we were going to change the name of the show to, is there echo? Do you hear echo? Do you hear echo?
No, audio sample right.
Oh, hey, you know what? So I was not public, so now the Facebook channel is just going live.
Audio preview.
Hello, everybody. If you're just joining us, we're playing roulette with software. Software roulette, where nobody's a winner and everybody's invested.
We all get to crash and burn publicly.
Hence the meaning crash.
Well,
you heard my email. I used to like the connection, Ash.
They say they're hearing now, so I think we're good with the advice you gave me. And I'm not getting any echo either. So that's great.
No, I should start saying back what you say just so fast that you think it's echo.
Let's just make sure they can hear. There's echo on my channel. Okay. Someone says echo on my channel. Probably because I've got sound coming from two places. Let me make sure you're just getting it from one place.
Alrighty. So and while he's working on that, what we were about to talk about, and we will in a second, is why the heck are we doing this? Why are we taking up everybody's valuable time?
Okay, stream only.
Me personally, I would just have the video transcribed, and then I would proofread, speed read it, rather than wait 20 minutes to hear 20 minutes of content.
Could you keep talking, Bill? I just want to make sure people can hear you.
Sure. Somebody said the audio's better, so I assume they mean since yesterday.
Someone says echo on both. Someone else says too much echo. This is from YouTube.
YouTube.
Now both channels have echo. Golly, this
is actually what we worked hard on making sure this didn't happen, but it happened. That's life. Like I said, the name of it is How's My Echo, right?
So what if Bill, can you still hear me okay on Skype?
You're fine. I will scream or jump up and down and wave if something goes wrong in my direction.
I'm just configuring the different cameras to see...
You know what? Next time, can I stream your YouTube channel? That might be the way to fix this. So something to think about next time.
It will probably be easier if one of us is doing it. It's true.
Right. So, and I'm streaming two Facebook channels. Hi, everybody. Facebook. Only I shouldn't slam Facebook. I'll do that in private time.
What I might do is just temporarily disable.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
No, it's if you have both mics open, that might be the source of the echo. All right. Yeah. But at least they'll hear us this time through, and we'll get better at this. I'm usually better the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth times I do something. After that, it's like a bell-shaped curve. Then I start getting bad at it again. It's kind of like aging, right? You get real good when you're tens and 20s and 30s. And then by the time you get to 61 again, it's like I've got the dexterity of an 8-year-old with 9 fingers. It's hard to make you laugh when you're intent.
I'm sorry, man.
No, I'm just filling time, trust me.
I started out as an electronics technician.
Yeah.
Someone says progress. Ben sounds good. Bill with echo.
Bill with
I know. To me, I can hear you, Bill, with no echo at all. But I'm not.
Right.
Also,
and I hear with no echo.
Yeah. So, someone else confirm echo on Bill's. Yeah, I think I have to turn off my
go to the try turning it off. In XSplit is the speaker X'd out down in the middle, the bottom fifth of the thing.
No.
Next to the gear.
No, because if I X that out, then no one. That was all X'd out, and that's why no one
Mine's
can
X'd
get
out
on YouTube. Okay.
So the sound for YouTube should come from when you right-click on.
Okay. So I have the little speaker X'd out. Yeah. Yep, and across the internet. Okay. How does it sound now? Yeah, that no sound from Bill is what I'm getting from YouTube. That's because of the speaker. That's because of the little speaker thing. So we have to have that. We have to figure out how, which source needs to be disconnected.
Right.
So I have you. If I right click on you, I've got stream only, which is what we did yesterday, and that was fine. Right?
And I just right-clicked on you and turned off your speaker completely, and I turned on the outside one. So let's see what they say now. See, they weren't complaining until a second ago, a minute ago, about not hearing you.
Okay, so now I'm hearing myself in side tone.
Oops, and now I'm playing Facebook by accident. So we were going to have a show today, but really what this is we are troubleshooting Facebook for you, actually XSplit, live. Okay, Bill Clear, good to launch, much better. Somebody's saying they hear both of us. Say something. They hear you on Facebook now.
Hello, can you hear me on Facebook?
Hey.
Hello.
All right, so Facebook, answer them when you get a chance. It'll be 30-second delay. So, if you look out and see a mushroom cloud and a bright flash, it's not here yet because there's a 30-second delay in life. Probably because my rods and cones are going.
Okay, echoes on Facebook. I can't talk properly now because of the side tone. Okay, how about on YouTube? Yeah, we're not really time bound. Now someone says I sound fine and no sound from you again. Gosh, this is frustrating. We all Did this yesterday and everything worked. Sorry, folks. Oh, I know what I forgot to do. I forgot to set my Zoom H6 to stream only instead of system sound. So now we should be good. This is what we had.
Question for everybody, how is it as of 14:19 in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time? Actually, what part of the world is that's also 14 or 2:19? It's not Japan, that's 13 hours. So why are we doing this, though? Why do we just troubleshoot? I keep asking that, but we keep troubleshooting, as life often works. If you've ever been on an ambulance call, it's the same way. It's like you're working the patient, something else goes wrong, you adapt to that, and then you move forward back to what you were trying to do, which is get oxygen on them, without starting the fire, I might add. So what I was saying why we're starting doing this is I wanted to talk to an Altium expert on a weekly basis. That's my main impact. So if you're watching this, that's a good reason for you guys to come around too. And when we say Altium, I swear I mean every CAD station ever written, because I think I've used most of them. And Altium is a modern representation of where the CAD systems are at our level, not. There's another level of the KiCad users and the Eagle users and whatnot, which is great for hobbyists and in small business. So that's your chance to plug it, though.
Thank you. Actually, for hobbyists, there is a free version, which is Circuit Maker for open source. But even Altium Designer is pretty accessible now.
Yes. I own,
especially right now.
Yeah, and I bought mine myself, not as a business, but I bought mine just to stay in it a couple of years ago. And now that has led to me being more in it, more interested, because I have a good tool. And a tool is everything in this business.
Oh my God. I'm still getting messages that we still all have echo. So I'm clicking the little speaker thing. I'm going to keep the faith that this stream only setting you told me about is now working. Right. Well, my kids were watching in the other room just to try and help, but sorry, Chris. Chris has given up on us. Oh no, please. Yeah. Okay. System sound. The SI list. There's a lot of very exceptionally helpful people on that list. Actually, I was commenting on a video post by Yuri Shlepnev. Now, Yuri's kind of a guru. He created the company and the product, the company Symbian, and this Symbior is the field solver, right? And it's pretty well known in the SI community. Now people are saying no sound, so I can't use that no speaker thing.
Turn them all on.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
That's where you just load your last clip and go over the hill. Just go for it. So I'm going to keep talking while you're doing that. But what Yuri's thing though went down to, he was starting to show how getting back down to quantum effect and electrons was what I took from Yuri. I didn't read his, but I read yours. So it was DC to the lower end of stuff, right?
Well, what was interesting? Yeah, what was interesting was someone had made a comment to bring things back to audio frequency, which to SI people and RF designers is DC. Like they think of 5 kilohertz, 10 kilohertz, 30 kilohertz as being DC.
The electrons actually have time to arrive, during the signal. Whereas at the frequencies you and I like to play with, it's about electromagnetic fields arriving.
Well, but it's still the field's still there. It's just the electrons, to your point, respond to the fields, and they move.
But if you wait long enough, then the actual electron that went in actually pops out the end. But normally it's just
true DC. It's true DC. But what Yuri was showing was that even in field solvers, which are designed to simulate very high frequency things, you can still the principles don't change, and so you can get a simulation.
You can get your answers from
And so what he did was he ran a simulation with a very thick conductor for a ground plane and a very thin conductor for a ground plane. And the comments are distracting me.
I'll tell you,
hurting my ears. The echo's hurting my ears. My question is, how can I make? I'm going to kill my microphone as a source because I think the source has to be just Skype. But my concern is people won't hear me, then they'll only hear you. But here goes. I'm going to try it.
All right. So and then. We have two channels working. But what all that reminded me of, and like I said, I'm going to talk while you're doing that, is I have a love for old-fashioned books sometimes, and that reminded me of this book called Switching Power Supplies. And what I'll show you is how thick this is. If to make a true switching power supply today is so multi-science. You got to know the things about DC and the PC board layout of high currents, but you also have to understand that you could get a resonant if you get the distance wrong on even a conductor itself.
Yeah.
It's like water flowing where you can get swirls and eddies, and sometimes we use eddy currents too much to complain. Other times we don't use it enough. And so one of the Hackaday guys, Al White, not wrong. But Al from Hackaday, he's actually worked for Boeing. He's got a product he did is up on the International Space Station and stuff. And he was saying that one of the vendors said, yeah, we'll do that switching supply in 6 months. And when he described it to me, I said, Al, that's Al Williams is his name. I said, Al, that's 2.5 man-years of work. He said, that's how long it actually took. And that's because you have to do everything in a big book like this.
Yeah.
If you were really doing a serious thing.
Who's that one written by? Is that Pressman's book?
Manic Tala. I'm not even saying his name right.
Okay.
But this is an example.
It's funny. You should bring that up. This is my one I've been using lately. It's similar thickness. This one's by Pressman on McGraw-Hill, and they're probably pretty much exactly the same.
I was going to say 95% should be the same, or our science isn't near as sciencey as we thought it was. But this is great because it does talk EMI, which I love. I love ground loop problems. I love solving EMI problems. And so this is kind of a Bible, even though I'll never use most of what's in this because I'm not a switching power supply designer. But just to show where we get our information from. So. Now I met Hap. What's Hap's last name? At the Altium Live 2018. Happy Hour. Holden. Yeah, I suck at, excuse me, I'm not good at names, so I'll just say that right offhand. So it's my tokenizer, it's only 2 bits now. And one of those bits is a little flaky after 4 o'clock. But Hap, he did tons of material stuff. That is the Bible to this day, right? He was at HP doing that?
Oh yeah. He and then he went over to a big PCB factory in China. So and ran that as
but that was after China opened.
Yeah, that was for Foxconn, basically.
Can't get bigger than that for as far as us see the Chinese industry at least. So, but it's funny. I went there going, I know that name, and it's only when he was signing the books that I look down and go, I have that book for like 15. He's on the 12th edition. I have like the 3rd edition from 15 years ago or something. But here's another book. Since we kind of PCB is kind of what we have in common here. But again, it's the point is you have to pick through all this stuff to find the nuggets. Or work next to really brilliant people who have already read this stuff and subscribe
to the right channels.
Right?
Yeah.
The trick is knowing what applies, and that's those little nuggets of knowing, and that's where you and I were talking where Rick said, what's the difference between light and radio waves, and it's the answer is frequency. And until I heard somebody say that out loud, I was afraid to say that out loud, even though in my mind I knew that. So that was...
I realized my video is mirrored too. Someone just left a comment. I guess that's the webcam software doing that. I can
doing the penguin?
Yeah, I can pretty easily fix that, I think. Let's see. If I go to effects, layout. Area and webcam is what I'm using there, but... Oh well. You know what?
So yeah, I can actually... What do I do with it?
Like we said, we're going to try this or break something. And we'll break something after we're done anyway.
There's no guarantee we'll get better at this. Yeah.
Oh, we will. It's impossible not to get better at this than we are.
Actually, I lost my Commodore board that I was going to show.
Well, actually, I have something to show you.
Okay. Well, this is why I'm wireless. So that we'll say somebody came up with a brand new PC board for one of the old Commodore things. And so what do you have?
Well, just since you were an original 6502 kind of guy.
I'm certainly an early user. Yeah. 1980.
This was my when I went to college back in 1992. So this was already way out of date at the time. They bought up big and used these for a long time at the college I went to. But this is one of our final projects we had.
Hold it up. Yep. Okay.
So,
and it's the days before when silkscreen cost so much extra that we didn't put silkscreen on prototypes.
Right. So this is actually called a Zim. A WIM. WYM. A WIM.
Okay.
And which is a knockoff of the name. Kim. The Kim. Yeah. The first 6502 development kit was called a Kim. And so we had to build this. The college made the PCBs in their own little lab with their own little etching tank and plating bath. We had to wire wrap the peripherals on.
Right.
I hated it. But
and there's no feed-throughs. So you have to slot both sides of the board.
As far as I know, this still works. It has a ROM monitor in it. And I tried to get in touch with the original. There were two guys at the college, two teachers that designed this. Dennis Fox was the guy who designed this PCB. His name's on it, and that's how I remembered him. I had him in one of my two microcomputer classes back then.
And there's the CenterTech logo on one of your chips. The big inverted Y logo is CenterTech, right?
It's Rockwell. That's the Rockwell logo.
I mean Rockwell. Excuse me. There were three people made the 6502. It was MLS, Rockwell, and CenterTech.
So these are the Rockwell 6502, which is with 2 megahertz, and the 6522 VIA, which actually really is versatile. That was a good chip. That had a lot of cool stuff in it.
So I was supposed to interview Bill Mensch, who did both of those, the actual designer. And I told him for the 6522, I told him exactly what you said. I said, that was a stellar chip. And he's like, really? You're talking about that long ago? And I said, yeah, the auto clock reload feature, I owe you a beer over it. And so here he's forgetting about a feature that changed the world for us, which was that the clock, the interrupts would happen regularly no matter how long it took you to respond to them. Because before then you'd get an interrupt, you had to get there as fast as you can and reload the timer, and so the next one would jitter. And he put in a thing that said, no, just reload it, keep going, and let the processor catch up to it. So, yes, go on, though. That is a very VIA, that's a versatile interface adapter, yes.
Yeah, people are asking for the Facebook link, so I'm just going to type it in for them, right? It's just your Facebook.
And it's set for public, so they should be able to see it.
/BIL_HERD.
I don't know.
That's your Facebook.
I think it's just Bill Herd, all one word, but I could be wrong. I'm looking at it, and it doesn't tell me what my link is. Open link and do it. Yes, just /Bill Herd. Facebook /Bill Herd. 1L, BILHERD. So don't let the Australian accent throw any A's or U's in there.
That's right. Facebook.com/BILHERD.
You got it.
There's no underscore?
No underscore. So that's something we could talk about. Do you use underscores when you use tab, or do you use hyphens? How do you negate them? These are the questions we've had in tabs for 20 years.
It depends on the software. Now it does. As a preference, people often use an underscore character with a suffix or just an underscore.
Right.
But in Altium design, you use a backslash, and that puts a bar over one of the letters.
Right. Now I don't use an underscore because if you put it down on a net wire, you might not see the underscore. You might just see a word, a space, and a word, because the underscore gets into it.
Can I ask you just one last time, Bill, to stop and tell me exactly the settings you have for sound for streaming? Because everyone on Facebook is trying Facebook and coming back to YouTube and commenting and saying Facebook sounds good. So what have you done in all your settings exactly so I can duplicate them on this side?
So when I right-click on you, which is Skype, do you have me in XSplit?
You're in Skype in XSplit. You're in XSplit as Skype. Skype in the
Okay. Very good. So when I right-click on you, and I have the audio output has the circle with the slash through it, and it says system sound also.
The circle and slash is probably what I'm missing. Because that was enabled. Okay, now
I heard echo.
Now I think that's the problem solved. Let's see.
Okay. While they're doing that, I'll show a board. So, because you were talking, and mine's got a torn wrap wire.
Wait, before you jump ahead, what's your setting on yourself?
Okay. I I have a terminate at once order that I put on myself. It's a contract. Oh, no, wait, that's different. I have the same thing. I have the speaker X'd out, and then I have it stream only for the audio output. And I'm going to cancel the kill order. Hold on a second. Don't ever hang out with assassins. They have no sense of humor.
Okay.
Or they do have a sense of humor. That's even worse, actually. They'll kill you for a joke.
And you have a separate audio input as a source in XSplit?
No. I'm using XSplit as the audio input.
It has its own, taken from system sound?
Okay, so I right-click on you, and the NDI tab says my stream source is / video Skype you.
No, but the audio.
I am in the, above it's the audio output. I don't see any audio input settings.
No, audio output is stream only, but it's got the X
/
out.
Through the,
And
right.
the same for yourself as well?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe
it's working.
I'm
telling you, we should name the show Is it echoing today? Oh, you know what? We should develop a really, really strong echo canceller that will cancel echo no matter what the source of it is. We do it in an FPGA.
I don't know
Run
if
a
that's
fast
possible.
autocorrelator. I think so. There'll be artifacts left, but I'll bet it can be done. Can you imagine? So you were talking about being a guitar player, right? And the effects like overdriven,
distortion.
Stuff. Picture that you could make a box that takes the distortion back out of it, and you hear exactly what was being played as if you were listening to just the strings nearby. That'd be cool.
That would be really hard to do, given that distortion is non-linear.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know that. And the artifacts. The second, and you just said it by saying nonlinear, but the secondary order is second in terms, and then just what happens when something does clip and goes sideways on you and up the spurious frequencies. Yeah, I didn't say it'd be easy.
No.
Actually, you know how you would do it? You would teach an AI. You would just give the AI good speech, give it the bad speech, and tell it to make the bad speech good again. Instead of writing it yourself.
We've finally done it, Bill. I should have done that at the beginning of the call. I've got word from Eric Olbach. Thank you, Eric, that we both sound good on both YouTube and Facebook.
Is that Eric from Altium?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe.
Eric with a CH?
Yes, it must be. Tthank you, Eric.
Hi, Eric.
He's one of our top-notch tech support guys. Thank you, Eric.
He helped me the other day. He was on 11 streams, and I was his 12th, I think.
Well, now he's on our stream.
Yeah. I'll
Okay.
get you back, Eric.
So now that we're 45 minutes in and finally got the sounds figured out.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Don't say that.
I'm not wearing a watch. I don't have to go.
No. My plan was always to go as long as we wanted, but probably around about an hour. So given that, we've got some time.
Oh, I was thinking 20 minutes, but okay, an hour. I can do an hour.
Well, this time. Maybe we'll make it 20 or 30 minutes next time. Okay. So, Bill, you were going to show us the C128 motherboard, and I do want you to bring that up and talk about that some more. But you had some exciting news about that recently, right?
And that's why I was just saying it wasn't on my list to show, and I don't see it, so we're going to have to skip over that. And the next show,
that's
not about echo.
That can be the cliffhanger. That can be the cliffhanger.
There's a new PC board out, and I'm going to show you one. And then we're going to, here's the thing, I'm going to throw it on the TDR, and I'm going to test something I had to fix 35 years ago. I'm going to use modern equipment to look at what I had to fix way back then. Okay,
so now... you wanted to go back, and we originally started talking about you talked about backslashes and or how do you negate things in schematic,
right?
But you had a few questions. You had a few questions about that. So,
well, it's. I was asking actually your personal preference at first, because sometimes when we want to use suffixes and stuff, we use underscores. And remember, I also use FPGA software, and sometimes you can't use a minus sign, a hyphen, because it's a minus sign, and other times you can't use an underscore because it's a special character.
Right. And
so
going back to that,
depends on the CAD. Yeah.
Yeah, but there was some other stuff you wanted to talk about on the front end of things as an engineer. You know, we've done a lot of marketing and talking in the last 4 or 5 years about PCB because we wanted to close technology gaps and all of that. And that's all good. We fix bugs, add features people have been asking for actual routing, because that's mainly where people have to spend the bulk of their time designing.
Right.
But it's easy to forget Altium Designer is known a lot as a schematic tool as well, and that's a very powerful and easy to use one, but that's my biased opinion. I've been using it for 18 years or something. So but you came from other tools. You've used Mentor, you've used even Proteus when we first started chatting a few years ago.
I still keep a copy. Yep.
You've tried, and each tool seems like most engineers have a kit bag full of a few different things for different reasons. And my question is to you, what's the barrier or the holdup? Because I feel like you can have all of those things in one tool, and I guess there's a practical element to, if you're a contract designer, so you probably have to use what your customer wants you to for a given job as well. There's a bit of that as well.
Because I'm an old fart. You know, if somebody comes to me, I say, well, I'm going to do my work product in Altium. So and Altium can export and import, so that's not as big a deal. But Proteus, unfortunately, couldn't import and export. So if you started in Proteus, you ended in Proteus. So, but as you were saying earlier, you could give a net list to somebody in pads, and they could lay out in pads and then give it back to you. All those paths exist in there.
Right, but they're all error prone and horrible, and
they are.
Lead to frustration.
But in the old days, we used to hand type net lists in the old days. You know, that's how we actually. And so we had net list day, where one guy would sit there and read it, and the other guy would put a marker right on either the Mylar, or not on the Mylar, but on a blue line of the Mylar, or a schematic or something. So it was all hand checking in the old days.
And so that's just another reason to do it all in one package if you can, because, you know, even tools, I think, having used the same thing and been an expert at Altium for so many years now, I take some of these things for granted, just the ability to synchronize from schematic and PCB in one tool, one user interface, and use cross-probing, cross-select. But you were talking about one thing, which is no ERCs, which are still a bit of a mystery to a lot of people.
Right.
And so
right.
Did you want to...
Electrical rule check, yeah.
The electrical rule checking.
Right. So in the old days,
to look at?
It was let's show that in a second, but to set it up for you, there's two sets of things. Electrical rule checks I tend to think of as the schematics. It's like, well, what are you trying to do electrically? And then there's design rule checks, which are like, well, is the pad hanging off the edge of the board? And so in the electrical rule check, I used to be the electrical rule checker as a designer. It was up to me to make sure I didn't leave any floating input pins, that I didn't have two outputs clashing to each other, and that the power pins were hooked up. By the way, I hate hidden power pins. If I have one passion, it's that I don't do hidden power pins, and that we should talk about that on a different one.
Yeah, actually, I agree with you on that one.
Yep.
They're very dangerous.
Because you can make a mistake. If you cannot manually check it, then how do you know the automation's working? That's my point. So for electrical rule checks, what we can do now is there's a whole array of things we can check, and that's under control of the designer. But it'll say, did you really mean for this to be floating input? And then that's where you come in. You show them what a squiggle looks like if you've got that, and that's the official term, right?
Squiggle.
Which isn't that the same thing for the emissivity? The symbol for emissivity is, don't people call that a squiggle also? The little, it's not an omega. I can't remember. See, I'm a high school dropout, so my Greek is like,
I don't know. Let me switch to the desktop, and so you can see I've got a schematic open now. This one's actually a clean one, so let me try to precipitate an issue.
So I'm still seeing you first off. Yeah, you got to do it to Skype.
Okay, so I'm streaming this as XSplit. So maybe what I need to do is go back to Skype.
Right.
And share my screen. Give me a second here.
Your camera jumped when the door slammed. That was cool.
Oh yeah, my wife just got home from the dentist and she needs to unlock some door and can't find the key. But she has to wait. She'll just have to wait.
I'm waiting to go back to the dentist till after COVID. Yeah. So I'm not seeing you.
I'm trying to share my screen.
I see you on Skype, but I'm not seeing you on my XSplit. So give me a second, and I will. So this is a learning experience for all of us.
And I'm on my XSplit. I'm sharing my screen on Skype, but I'm also sending it to XSplit, so that.
And actually, I can see now, and so can the Facebook people, can see both you and your shared screen simultaneously, which is cool.
That is cool.
That is cool.
Let me see.
I'm easily impressed when software works, and that's because I'm cynical.
And on YouTube, we're just looking at my desktop. So let me jump into this real quick. So what you're referring to is the squiggles. Let me bring up a broken or unfinished design here real quick so people know what we're talking about. Let's go to.
So one thing you'll mention is you've turned on interactive design rules probably too, or you do it every time you do a validate.
Not to confuse. Yeah, there's two sides of this. So there's electrical rules checking, and that's entirely on the schematic side. Actually, here's an unfinished design I have, this HexFET power amp.
Oh, I was around when HexFETs first came out. They were VFETs, where they were trying to not go as lateral with the FET and increase the surface area, because surface area is current and surface area is also heat. And now they make them out of little hex-shaped wells, where it's the
like
side
a honeycomb.
Of the wells. Yeah, it's oh my God. Sometimes people impress me.
They're really nice. Yeah, they're really nice. Yeah. So what happens here is in older versions of Altium Designer, you'd right-click and say compile. But there was also this background interactive compiler that would look for problems in the way you'd wired up a schematic. And if you did something like, for example, let's call this Q2.
Is this a flip-flop on the front end of this?
These are the squiggles.
Does it have a latch? Yeah, no. But
this is a class. No, this is a power amp, right? So this is a fully differential long tail pair input stage.
Yep.
So this.
And I see your splitters and everything. We can actually go through the whole thing. That'd be cool. But go ahead.
Yeah, it's unfinished right now, but I'll do that soon. So it tells you there's a problem. So that, as of Altium Designer 20, that went entirely interactive. And if you really want to run a full batch of tests and get a report, you can right-click here and say validate. But this is the squiggles you're referring to.
Right.
But sometimes you get squiggles. Sometimes you get not Q1.
Yeah, well, that's a squiggle because it didn't have a.
Right, and you fixed the problem. So I had duplicated designators, and now I don't.
Right.
Okay, so if I go into another more complex full-on design here, like this one, and see, we have all these IOs on, this is, I guess, a Max 5 CPLD. And if I do something like move that, see, I'm looking at a net label here, and this identifies the wire attached to this pin. And let's say and this is one of my pet peeves, let's say you build a component in the library and you use a grid of 1 instead of 10. Or in other words, if you set your grid to the default minimum, which is 10 mils, you can place objects 10 mils off, right? And so you might be placing schematics and wiring things up, and you might end up with something like this, where let's say the Y height of this object is actually 43 instead of 4300 on grid, and I like to stick to a grid of 100 mils and basically not change it unless I'm moving text. And by text, I mean dumb text, not net labels.
Yeah, press and hold shift.
Because if I zoom out, that looks pretty good when I print this, but the net assigned to this wire is now net U1_34. It's not any longer named host_dout. And people do this kind of thing. The software should be architected in such a way that it discourages at the very least. And out of the box, the default grid for schematic is 100 mil. And so that won't, if you stick with your defaults, that won't happen. But inevitably, somewhere along the line, you'll be wanting to make something look nice to print it out, or to fit more on a smaller page, or for whatever reason, maybe you'll just you're in the process of moving around labels for things. And you're like, that seems to be snapping to too coarse of a grid. So you hit G and change grid a few times. So I hit G 3 times. Now I can move this text, which is a designator object, and it doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't have to electrically connect to anything. It's a designator, right? So I can move it on a very fine grid and no problem. And then without thinking, I leave it on that grid, and next thing you know, I'm moving resistors around.
Right.
And they're on that very fine grid, and then sometime later I realize, oh, I don't want to be on a grid of 10 mil, I want to go back to 100. And so you're editing someplace else, and you completely forget what you've done down here. But
been there, done it. Or you
but
go into
now,
a component editor.
But now I can't click on that resistor to move it back, because that resistor's not on the grid that my mouse is currently on. Right? So the only way to get it back is to undo that change, and that's a pain, because maybe I've made other edits since, and I don't want to lose those edits. So
what about the
just
place
be very
on grid
careful.
command?
You can
saw that the other day.
You can do that. That is I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's a very useful tool for fixing these sorts of issues that people paint themselves into corners all the time.
Right.
And this is a very useful thing to do. So you can go, I think it's, where is it?
Is it edit, move, that kind of thing?
You can see I don't use it very often. It's actually on the active bar, and you have to have selections to do it. So let's select these resistors, and then the align active bar pops up, and there's a generic
align to grid. That's it.
A generic. Yep. But you got to be careful. That will do a move. So if you have wires and you do an align to grid, you've got to be super careful, because it may break.
It's like anything.
Usually will break.
Tool. Yep.
It will usually break connections, and you may not, again, a wire may remain off grid by 1 point, but all the other objects snap onto the grid because of the selection you've done.
Right.
Because maybe everything, all these wires were off grid against those pins, and you just do a selection like this and you align to grid. Well, now all the net labels are aligned to grid, but not the wires, and they may be off by just 1 mil. And if they're off by 1 mil, it'll look right, but it won't connect. So you got to be careful, and that's why we have the squiggles.
The RCs.
The squiggles. Yes. So if I I don't know, let's do this again. Let's move that by
real quick.
a few points.
Let me stop you for a second, though, because you're also making my point See how it says host declock? Go ahead, zoom back in. Zoom back in like you were.
Yeah.
See how you can't see the underscores, and so you
Yeah.
assume there's an underscore, and that's why I don't like underscores. I use hyphens, but some CAD systems go, no, a hyphen is a minus sign.
Right.
So, but that I detest underscores, me personally. Now, if you use FPGA editor, I think you have to use underscores. I think you get into trouble if you use hyphens. But go ahead. That's you just hit on a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah. So here's another thing. The electrical rules that generate the squiggle. See, I just went and did a validate, and I don't see no squiggle, and I should be. So that's a problem. And so it makes me want to go and check the settings. If I right-click on the project and go in here.
Oh, validate. Did you validate? I'm sorry, I missed that. I was playing with my...
I did a right-click validate. Now, where is that window? Let me do Windows M. That's not the right...
Yeah, you know, the last thing I want to do is actually use Altium in front of somebody, because if you saw me using Altium, Ben, you'd be going, oh, no, faster. No, that's the wrong menu. No, go faster, you know, because I'm old.
Yeah.
I'm just not that CAD speedy anymore.
What's the... I've forgotten a shortcut.
I have a hard time with a phone. You know, all those buttons on the phone with numbers. I mean, they can throw me sometimes, you know?
Yeah. Bill, remind me the Windows shortcut to get a... It's Alt-Shift-Space?
For what?
To get a lost dialogue that's off monitor back on.
Oh, no, I didn't know you could find a lost dialogue. I end up, like, moving stuff. And I have had a dialogue where it just dings, and it's up to you to find the dialogue. I mouse over Altium sometimes, and that'll show you if you have two windows, like you just did.
Yeah, let's go.
But you don't have to see it work for people to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we knew where to go to get to the setting.
So, and I thought I did see a setting that said enable interactive ERCs. I thought I still saw that, but I have mine turned on, so I didn't know that if it's turn offable these days.
Yeah. It's fully configurable, and some of them you can turn off. And there's one that says floating net label. So if I run a validate on this, it ought to flag this as an error. That's what I was trying to show, but anyway. Yeah, we probably don't have time to go too much further, but...
Yep.
So that's just a little tip, and we'll do more of these in future streams now that we've figured out how to get it working. I'm just switching back to the Skype view here with both of us.
And you know what might be handy is like the demo you just did. If you actually produced a small 2-minute thing that showed it like calmly and narrated by you, you could show it live and then put a link to it so people later could watch just that tip.
We can. Or actually we actually have a lot of these tips already done. The difficulty is corralling the videos, but what we're doing is we're putting all of this kind of technical how-to stuff in the Altium Academy channel, which is why I wanted to stream to the Altium Academy channel on YouTube today.
Right.
And yeah.
So, and you were right, by the way, about Google. I was going, hey, I now use Google to look into the manual of Altium, for example, because it's putting version 20 up at the top. And I'm going, hey, that's some great SEO, which it is because it's compatible with Google. But then I remembered that something I've already learned, which is no, it's doing that because of my history, and if I were to go incognito, I wouldn't get as good a result. So you're right. That was Google Googling me, you know, while I was using it. And that's not a good phrase for Google, you know. I mean, Google in the way they kind of hit you in the back a little bit, you know. So, yeah, so I'd love to do like a tip every time, and maybe we'll do those up front so people don't have to watch 20 minutes to get like a tip a show or something.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do tips early on. We'll do tidbits. Anything interesting you're working on that's
I got things.
That's public.
Like these things.
That's cool.
We should do, and this is the thing, these aren't for blowing bubbles. That would be perfect for blowing bubbles. These are near-field probes, and you can make one yourself these days, and that's actually something they're so cheap now, I stopped working on a project for it. But we should show this because at a future show, because you hook this to the right equipment, and it tells you how well you did do the PCB layout or emissions problems or other things. So that's one project I had. My other project was an open source radar, and I want to get back on that. Hopefully this gives me the incentive to do that. I was just working on the audio filter today that turns the beat frequency between continuous wave radar back into audio, and you can actually process it with your laptop as if it was audio. So that's like and it's RF though. I get to play with like 2 and 6 gigs, so that'll be cool. Like some stuff to talk about. Yeah. That's
cool. So I've one final closing question for you, Bill.
Okay.
And maybe it's also a topic for another live stream. How would you recommend people go about collecting or obtaining test equipment? Because it's one of the things I've struggled with. First of all, it's hard enough having an actual place to put it. If you're an engineer at a company and the company has its own engineering lab and you work in the lab and you've got it all there, well, fine. But for a lot of us here, we want to build, especially right now with the way things are, we need things at home. We want to build an area at home where we can design things and test things. And, when I went to college, the first thing they said was go get yourself a good multimeter, invest in it, spend a couple of $100, make sure it's a good quality one, because it will be with you your whole life. And they were right. I still have my first DMM, and I've collected some other good old ones even since then. So one tip I would have is obviously, so here's and this one's actually been calibrated, not recently, but there are places that sell companies that are unfortunately maybe closing out, or they're upgrading all their equipment, and they'll sell everything off real cheap at auction. So that's one way, of course, but it's still hard to get things like VNAs.
You can't get a VNA worth a hang off eBay, for example. Yeah. So you're right about meters.
What would be your advice?
There's my first meter. Yeah. So let me circle back to that, because you that was a loaded way to start when you say get yourself a good meter. This is my Simpson 260 from when I was 18. The only thing is I lost the battery box on the back. This still works, and it's intuitive. You can see if something's pulsing around. But then flukes. I've had this one since I was, 8 years after this one, and I still have them. So absolutely, you get yourself a good meter like that. I started when that scope over there, just a Tektronix 2465, was worth like 3 times my salary. And as a home user, as an engineer, I had to work at a place that had a hardware lab for me to do my job. I could not do any of it hardly at home except maybe solder. So I've been collecting what you see behind me over 10, 15 years, and almost all mine's eBay. So now I'm not talking about my modern equipment. I have a real good relationship with Tektronix, so that's where I got my VNA. I've got a spectrum analyzer, an RSA, and I've got the 3000 MDO scope. And honestly, a couple of those are worth all the rest of my equipment combined, just one of those. So, but eBay is the thing, and it's really about looking at what you're trying to accomplish, and then you got to apply it to know what you're looking for. And that's the hardest part. That's the hardest part. And not all of mine have been successful. I bought an old spectrum analyzer, and it took me 6 months to figure out that it had always had a blown input. That's why it never made sense what it was showing me. So that's the other thing, is you may be be prepared to throw away what you buy, because you might have bought a piece of junk, and then go try it again is my advice.
And what about what would be your advice to anyone tempted to build their own? Because sometimes that's almost like an engineering rite of passage. To really be able to use test equipment is to know how it works. And there's
hang
no
out
better
at
way.
Hackaday. If you're interested in that, there's people like Ted Yappo on Hackaday, and he is building his own test equipment. My problem with that is, how are you going to test your test equipment while you're building it if you don't have test equipment? So I'm not big on, because I am a professional engineer at my core, my test equipment really is that vision into my circuit that I have. So I kind of don't dink. I use the right scope probes, for example. I won't go get a clone scope probe. It just wasn't worth it to me. So, but there is some amazing, Rigel, how did they say it? That whole series of scopes?
I have no idea how that's meant to be pronounced. I call it Rigol, but that's
okay.
Just my Aussie way of saying it.
Yeah, but they really lowered that. When I saw the actual editors at Hackaday start using those, then I'm like, oh wow, they overcame a cost barrier. If Mike Skizzy can, use one at home while he's editing the Hackaday columns and stuff. That was really cool.
Even today, saw on the Twitter feeds someone up in LA selling off their DS1102E, which is the 2-channel 100 megahertz Rigol scope that really took the world by storm. He's upgraded, and so he's selling off that one for $40 if you can go pick it up or pay for shipping. And I'm thinking that's just so cheap. Like,
oh, and some of this stuff is so heavy. I had to reinforce that whole shelf area there. You get an old HP signal generator, and it costs you $200 to ship it if the guy's not a professional shipper. By the way, here's my first multimeter from when I was. This is actually one I bought on eBay, but this is the kind I had first. This is a Nixie tube Heath kit. I built it, right?
Awesome.
And I had something wrong in mind, so the first time I grabbed the probes to do like resistance, I caught the 170 volts from the Nixie tube across my hands, and so I hated it every day after that. After I built it, I didn't trust it. It's like, well, is it going to inject 170 volts into my circuit and break it? So I turned it into a clock or something. I just had a ramping voltage or something, But yeah, but I have one of these just because I love the look of Nixie tubes, right?
Yeah, who doesn't?
Who doesn't? That's right.
Who doesn't?
And
oh, they look awesome.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I hate to think those things must be worth a mint by now, if you can find them.
Russia still has, I don't know if they're actively making them, but they certainly have stock.
that Heathkit meter, if you could find one like that in good working condition, it would be worth a fortune.
Oh, well, that actually works.
Yeah. I might know someone who wants to buy it off you.
Well, I got it off eBay for like $60, so
that's so cheap.
You just have to watch for what you want, So in closing to your question, part of the answer is know what you're looking for, and I set watch filters, and the first time something comes up, don't get married to it. It might be a broken one. It might be just keep looking. And so I waited for that one to come up, and then I snagged it right away when it did. And I always do buy it now. I don't do that biddy. If I want something, I usually buy it now unless they're being obnoxious with the price.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
All right. Well, this was interesting. It was long. I appreciate everybody for hanging around.
Yep.
Let's see. Yeah, Rigel, somebody's talking about that, so they're still listening, at least over in Facebook. So, let's talk about other stuff in the future. We should tease some things here. We talked about Commodore a little bit. We'll do that. I know ways to break, as you know, I can break Altium. I've shown you negative trace widths and things like that, right?
Yeah.
I showed the auto symbol creator created something off grid. I actually figured out a little bit what's going on. I'll talk to you offline. But yeah, my whole thing is let's also talk retro, and I think you're up for that. And that's what we've been doing by waving this kind of junk around.
Yep.
So, and I'll also tell somebody, if you're stuck on a problem, maybe this is a forum where you can kind of ask that question. Between the two of us, we in theory know electronics, and there's sometimes just being around somebody else, they can go, oh yeah, I did that. Yep. You need to do this to that resistor or something like that, to that circuit, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where we want it to go. So now that we've ironed out the bugs of sound and done our first run, the next one, ought to be very smooth and have none of those troubles. So we can use the live chat to actually answer questions that come in from outside too, and that would be awesome.
Right. So, all right. Well, I want to thank everybody on the Facebook side for watching, and the YouTube got ironed out, right?
Yep.
You got a good stream going
in the end, and thank you everyone.
Do a save your setup for XSplit.
Yep. I'm going to do that right now.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. See you next time.
Take care, man.
Bye.
And down go the stream.